Some men discover who they truly are when everything is going right, but the men who discover who they really are, they find out when everything falls apart. My name is William Franklin. I'm 44 years old. And 6 months ago, I was standing in a $4 million Victorian mansion in Lincoln Park, Chicago, watching my wife get dressed for another man, and she had no idea I was home. But before I tell you what happened that night, I need you to understand something. I didn't build my life by accident. I clawed my way out of a working-class neighborhood in Detroit with nothing but ambition and a refusal to fail. By the time I was 44, my venture capital portfolio was worth north of $50 million. Tech startups, medical device companies. I had my fingers in everything. Success wasn't just my profession. It was me. Every decision I made, every risk I calculated, every board meeting I walked into, I was always the smartest man in the room, and I knew it. I met Autumn 12 years ago at a charity auction. She was 29. A stunning brunette with emerald eyes that seemed to hold secrets I wanted to spend a lifetime discovering. She coordinated high-end fundraising events, the kind of woman who could make millionaires feel at ease while convincing them to write checks for worthy causes. When she laughed at my jokes that night, I already knew I was finished. Our wedding was featured in Chicago magazine. She wore a custom Vera Wang gown in the historic Palmer House Hotel, and I felt like the universe had finally rewarded me for every sacrifice I'd ever made. We honeymooned in Tuscany. 2 weeks of wine, sunsets, and planning our future together. She wanted to build an event planning business. I bankrolled it without hesitation. For 11 years, our life looked like the kind of thing other couples pinned to vision boards. The Lincoln Park mansion. Twice-yearly trips to Europe. A cabin in Aspen. Dinner parties that were the talk of the social circuit. Perfection, I've learned, is just another word for delusion. The first crack appeared last spring. Small things. She started working later. Taking calls in other rooms. Smiling at her phone with a softness she'd stopped directing at me years ago. When I asked, she'd wave me off, demanding clients, difficult vendors. I wanted to believe her because the alternative was something I couldn't yet afford to feel. Then came the changes. New workout classes that required special athletic wear. A sudden interest in lingerie I never got to see her wear. Weekend conferences that multiplied like rabbits. Each lie, on its own, was perfectly reasonable. But, together, they formed a pattern I was choosing not to read. The night I found out the truth, I was supposed to be in San Francisco closing a biotech deal. The meeting moved to Monday. I caught an earlier flight home, planned to surprise her with dinner at her favorite restaurant. Instead, I found her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. Theodore Thornfield. The name hit me like ice water. Theodore Thornfield wasn't just any name. He was the CEO of Meridian Holdings, a real estate developer I'd considered investing in 2 years ago. Silver-haired. Country club swagger. Married to a woman named Megan, a woman I'd met at charity events. A respectable marriage. Or so it appeared. 3 missed calls in the past hour. My hands were shaking when I picked up her phone. The message preview was right there on the locked screen, visible without even opening it. Can't wait for tonight. Room 412 at the Renaissance. Same as always. I could hear the shower still running upstairs. Autumn had no idea I was home. No idea her carefully constructed world was about to implode. I could have marched upstairs right then. Could have confronted her. Part of me wanted to. But something cold and calculating settled in my chest instead, the same instinct that had made me $50 million. You don't move until you have all the information. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. Walked quietly to my home office. Opened my laptop. And made a call to Raymond Cole, a former Chicago PD detective I'd used for due diligence on business partners for years. Raymond, I need surveillance on my wife. Full package. Where she goes, who she meets, how long this has been going on. Then I closed the laptop, leaned back in my leather chair, and looked at the framed photo on my desk. Autumn and me at our 5th anniversary party. Her arms wrapped around my neck. Both of us laughing. We looked happy. I thought we were happy. The footsteps on the stairs came 5 minutes later. She appeared in the doorway, black dress, 4-inch heels, makeup applied with the precision of a woman trying to impress someone else. She looked breathtaking, She kissed my cheek on the way out, and I caught a trace of expensive cologne that wasn't mine. "Don't wait up, honey." I watched her go. And for the first time in our 11 years of marriage, I saw my wife clearly. I just didn't know yet that the real secret wasn't the affair. It was something far older, far more complicated, and it was about to change everything. There's a particular kind of silence that fills a house after a betrayal. It isn't emptiness. It's the sound of everything you thought was real slowly turning to ash. I sat on my back deck until 3 in the morning, nursing bourbon and making decisions the way I'd always made them, with cold clarity. By dawn, I had 3 moves. First, I called my attorney David Sherman, college friend, high-asset divorce specialist. When I explained the situation, he said, "William, once we start the legal process, there's no going back. Draft the papers. Don't file yet. I want to control the timing." Second, I quietly liquidated non-essential assets and moved funds to accounts Autumn couldn't touch. All legal. All calculated. Third, and this is where it got interesting, I started researching Theodore Thornfield. Because if 2 people are playing a game, I make sure everyone plays by the same rules. Raymond Cole's encrypted report arrived the following afternoon. The photos were devastating. Autumn and Theodore entering the hotel together, leaving separately at dawn. But what stopped my heart wasn't the images. It was the timeline. Credit card records revealed this had been going on for 8 months. Not weeks. 8 months of her coming home to me, kissing me goodnight. 8 months of a performance I'd applauded every single night. But Cole's investigation uncovered something else entirely. Meridian Holdings, Theodore's flagship company, was hemorrhaging money. Not a bad quarter. Not poor management. A Ponzi scheme. He was using charm, connections, and Autumn's event planning network to prop up a company that was rotting from the inside. He wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was stealing from his investors. That's when I decided to meet Megan Thornfield. I orchestrated the encounter at a charity auction for the Chicago Children's Hospital. A legitimate setting. Autumn was actually working the event, genuinely, for once, managing logistics. Theodore arrived late, playing the role of generous donor while his company quietly collapsed behind the curtain. Megan came alone. Navy gown. Composed smile. But I'd spent 20 years reading people across boardroom tables. I could see the tension around her eyes. The way she held her champagne glass slightly too tightly. I introduced myself as a man casually considering real estate investments. Within minutes, she was telling me about Theodore's impossible schedule, the emergency meetings, the late nights, the constant travel. There was no suspicion in her voice. No accusation. Just the quiet exhaustion of a woman who'd been gaslit so thoroughly she'd begun to believe her husband's absence was simply the cost of ambition. By the time I walked to my car, I'd confirmed something important. Megan Thornfield was innocent. She was as much a victim as I was. And that changed the moral shape of everything I was about to do. Justice, I was learning, is never as clean as revenge. Then, 3 weeks into the investigation, Raymond Cole slid a manila folder across a diner table and said, "William, there's something else. It doesn't involve the affair, but it will complicate everything." I opened the folder, and the world tilted. Inside was a photograph of a 19-year-old kid who looked exactly like I had at that age. Same dark hair. Same jawline. Same green eyes that stared back at me from every mirror I'd ever stood in front of. "His name is Michael Franklin," Cole said quietly. "Lives in Milwaukee. His mother is Jennifer Franklin. She never married after you two broke up 20 years ago." Jennifer. The memory hit me with a force I wasn't prepared for. We'd dated during my final year at Northwestern. She was a journalism student, brilliant, passionate, and completely in love with a man who was too focused on his own future to see what he was leaving behind. Our relationship ended when I accepted a 6-month placement in London. By the time I returned, she was gone. She had tried to reach me once, Cole explained. A letter to my first investment firm when the boy was 3 years old. It was never forwarded. I'd already moved on to Franklin Capital Management. I stared at the surveillance photos. Michael working a coffee shop near the University of Wisconsin campus. Michael studying pre-law textbooks in the park. Michael, who had my face and had grown up without knowing I existed. Does Autumn know? I asked. No evidence of it. I drove to Milwaukee alone. Arrived 30 minutes early. Sat in the corner of that coffee shop with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture, watching the door. When Michael walked in, it was like looking through a time machine. He moved the way I had at 19. That same unconscious habit of running his hand through his hair when he was thinking. When he served an elderly woman who'd spilled her drink, cleaned it without being asked, brought her a replacement on the house, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Pride. Pure and immediate. When his shift ended, I followed him to a nearby park at a careful distance. He sat on a bench with his law textbooks. I approached slowly. Mind if I sit? All the other benches are taken. He looked up. A long moment passed. Then, okay, this is weird. You were at the coffee shop. Now you're here. Either you're following me or this is the strangest coincidence in history. I looked at this young man. My son. 20 years of absence sitting between us like a debt I could never fully repay. Michael, I said. My name is William Franklin. I think we need to talk. The recognition broke across his face like a wave. His skin went pale, then flushed, then pale again. You're him, he whispered. You're my father. Yes, I said. I am. And in that park bench moment, surrounded by tourists who had no idea what was happening between us, I understood something that all my money and all my strategy had never taught me. The real cost of a life built only for yourself is always paid by someone else. But this story wasn't over. Because I had a son. And I had a plan. And Theodore Thornfield had absolutely no idea what was coming. Michael sat across from me on that park bench, his pre-law textbooks forgotten between us, and I showed him the photographs on my phone. Autumn and Theodore entering hotels. Kissing in parking lots. Living a double life I'd been too trusting, or too proud, to see. Your wife is cheating on you, he said quietly. For 8 months. And I've been planning what comes next. There was a long pause. Then my son, this young man I'd known for less than 1 hour, looked me directly in the eye and asked the one question I hadn't expected. What do you actually want, William? Not revenge. Not justice. What do you want? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. Over the following 2 weeks, Michael and I met 4 more times. Coffee. Long walks along the Milwaukee waterfront. Conversations I hadn't known I'd been starving for. He was angry with me, rightly so, but he was also curious. Cautious. And somewhere beneath the 20 years of questions, I could see that he wanted a father the same way I was only now beginning to understand I'd wanted a son. I told him everything. Autumn's affair. Theodore's financial fraud. My conversations with Megan. My attorney waiting with drafted papers. My liquidated assets. And Michael listened to all of it, nodded slowly, and said, if you destroy them publicly, you destroy Megan too. She doesn't deserve that. He was right. A 19-year-old kid with no law degree yet had more moral clarity than I did with a $50 million portfolio and 3 decades of hard-won wisdom. I changed my approach. I met privately with his sec and provided Raymond Cole's complete file on Theodore's fraudulent financing scheme. No press. No public humiliation. Let the regulatory machinery do what it was designed to do. Within 3 months, Meridian Holdings would be under federal investigation. Theodore's world would unravel without me having to light a single match in public. For Megan, I arranged an anonymous referral to one of Chicago's most respected family attorneys, a woman who specialized in protecting the financial interests of spouses in high-asset fraud cases. Megan would not be left vulnerable when the walls came down. And Autumn? I chose the evening of the Chicago Children's Hospital Gala, the same charity venue where I'd first spoken to Megan, the place where Chicago's most influential people gathered every year. Autumn was coordinating the event. Her finest professional moment. Her name on the program as lead organizer. I arrived with Michael. I introduced him to everyone as my son. No dramatic speech. No public accusation. Just a quiet, deliberate statement of who I was and what my life actually contained, beyond the lies that had been living in it. I watched Autumn's face across the ballroom when she saw us together. The color leaving her cheeks. The champagne glass stopping halfway to her lips. The moment she understood that the man she thought she'd successfully deceived had spent months becoming someone she no longer recognized. I crossed the room, stood before her, and said, simply and quietly, "The divorce papers will be on the kitchen counter when you get home. David Sherman is expecting your call. The house is mine, it was before we married. Your business accounts are yours. I've been fair." She started to speak. "Don't," I said. "There's nothing left to perform." I turned and walked back to my son. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Autumn kept her business. I kept the mansion, though I sold it within the year. Too many rooms, too many echoes. I bought a smaller place in Lincoln Square. Clean lines. Natural light. Room for a guest bedroom. Theodore Thornfield surrendered his passport to federal investigators 7 weeks after the gala. His company collapsed. 3 of his board members faced charges alongside him. He and Meghan divorced quietly. She rebuilt. From everything I've heard, she rebuilt well. Michael enrolled in his 2nd year of pre-law at Wisconsin. We talk twice a week. He spent Christmas at my place. He ordered me to stop saying, "I'm sorry for the 20 years," every time I see him. "You can't fix the past," he told me, over coffee in my new kitchen. "You can only not waste the present." I wrote that down. I still carry it. The life lesson of William Franklin. We spend so much of our lives building, our portfolios, our reputations, our carefully curated versions of success, that we forget to build the one thing that actually holds any of it together. Presence. Not money. Not strategy. Not the perfectly executed revenge. Theodore Thornfield had a wife who loved him and he traded her for validation. Autumn had a marriage that millions would envy and she traded it for excitement. I had a son growing up in Milwaukee and I didn't even know he existed because I was too focused on building a life that looked impressive from the outside. Every one of us was guilty of the same thing. We were all somewhere else when we should have been here. The real twist in this story isn't the affair. It isn't the fraud. It isn't even the son I didn't know I had. The real twist is this: the man I became after losing everything I thought I wanted, that man was the one worth knowing all along.